Welcome to episode 195 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us, listener. Today, we're going to have a sustainable focus. We're going to look at the new Eurostar Snow Train, find out what Les Arcs is doing that sets them apart. Plus, we're chatting to Chemmy Alcott about her experience last winter of driving an electric car 5,000 miles back and forth across the Alps. Now, my name is Iain Martin. I'd like to introduce my guest today. For her third time on the show, I'm delighted to welcome Helen Coffey, travel editor at The Independent. Morning, Helen. How are you?
Morning, Iain. I'm very well, thank you.
Like me, possibly you might be feeling a little bit of a come down because we were both in the Alps over the last 3 or 4 days. So therefore, at this point, normally I ask my guests, when did you last ski or snowboard? I think I know your answer. Where were you?
I was in Teen, and it was on, I've already forgotten the days. It was on Tuesday, yes.
Time flies at this time of year, doesn't it? How was it, importantly, for our listeners, how was the snow in Teen?
Do you know what? It was really nice. They could have done with a little bit more. And I think the day we were leaving, it actually started snowing again. But these days, I'm not quite a fair weather skier. I will go out in anything, but I really, really enjoy it when it's obviously a bluebird day, the sun's shining. I can see the slopes. It's gorgeous. And we had that for 3 days. And so I'd actually take personally a little bit less snow and lovely sunshine over can't see a thing and amazing snow. But I know not everyone feels that way.
Evidently, it's each to their own. But you're right, there is more snow coming in. While you were in Teen, I was in Les Arcs, and really good conditions there. We have to qualify that by saying this time of year, but people know that quite early on, mid-December, you don't always get great snow. But my experience was, and I'm sure it was exactly the same in Teen, that the piste were in good condition. I was lucky enough to do a little bit of off-piste thanks to a guide I went with called Roma, who took me to some secret spots. But on piste, I felt it was pretty good. It was quite hard underfoot in a few places. That top snow had been pushed out the way, and because it had been cold, it wasn't like boilerplate or anything like that. But it was still quite hard, lower down. Did you find that in Teen?
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely sections. If you know Teen at all, there's kind of a route back in that it's a black run, and then the top of it is really nice, and then you get down to the bottom bit, especially at the end of the day. And a bit of it is narrow and it's not so nice. And it really was quite icy, when you're really going down the slope, which is sort of fine until when it is your last run of the day and it's kind of getting towards 4:30 or something and the conditions are bad and your legs are tired. It's not that nice, but that was very, very limited. So there were, lower down, there are a few quite icy runs, but otherwise I thought, just as you said, like conditions were surprisingly good for this time of year, pre-Christmas. I was delighted with it, really.
And when you're saying that final run was a bit difficult, is that affected by the fact that you were dancing on the tables at the Folly Deuce prior to that?
I don't know what you're talking about, Iain. No, not at all affected by that.
Evidently, conditions are good. Let's have a listen. We've got a few snow reports that have been sent in, so let's have a listen to those.
Hi, Iain. So a short update from Innsbruck. It's me, Elena, from the Tirol area. So I've been skiing the last few weeks and also nearby Innsbruck in Seefeld. It's just a 20 minutes drive from the city. There I've skied in the Rosshütte skiing area, but also in Axemal-les-Sums over the last few weekends. So although, the snow conditions were even better a few weeks ago, we had a lot of snow. Snow conditions are still good. Of course, it got warmer. Some snow melted as well, but the snow conditions are still good. And especially last weekend, the weather was just great. Bright blue skies. I mean, yes, the slopes were so good and we had a lot of fun on the pistes. So really happy about that and looking forward, to Christmas and Christmas holiday and many more skiing days in the sun. So the weather forecast for the weekend until Christmas predicts storms and also some rain and lots of snow at high altitudes. Also, the risk of avalanches has increased in certain areas, so we have to be careful here in the Tirol area.
Hi, this is Vanessa reporting from Les Menuires. We had 3 gorgeous days of sunshine earlier on this week, and yesterday, Wednesday, the 20th, was the first overcast day. It was a bit of an inversion. Up high in Val Thorens was sunny, but lower down there was freezing fog, and actually lower down again, so down towards Mirabel Village, there's a bit of fresh snow. Not as much fall as was in the forecast, maybe 5 centimetres. And then last night it tried to snow again, but very, very lightly. This morning, Thursday, it's overcast again, and there's a little bit of snow forecast, but hopefully tonight is when the real snow will come. But everything's open. I mean, there's still a few chairlifts closed, a few linking lifts, but nothing that doesn't stop you exploring the whole area. We skied all the way to Orel in one direction, down to Saint-Martin-de-Belleville, and all the way across to La Tania, and all the pistes are in fantastic condition. Really great for the time of year. It's our last day skiing today, so looking forward to exploring some more. And anyone who's coming out for Christmas, the slopes are in great shape.
Hi, it's Dave from Snow Pro Ski School. Today I am joining you from Villars, and I am here with Will and Finn. Will is the heir to the throne of the Hotel du Lac. Almost. You guys are at university, but you're on a break, I guess, right now. What university are you at?
So I'm at Durham.
So, gents, we're here to talk about snow. We're not here to talk about your future careers. But the question that everyone wants to know is, what is the snow like? And don't say white and cold.
Well, it's white and cold, but it is also, at the minute, it's beautiful, actually. In the mornings, it's great snow, quite crisp. And then later towards the afternoons, it gets a little bit more softer, which is quite nice in some aspects, especially if you're doing some jumps and in the park.
Yeah.
But especially towards the mornings, if you want to be on the slopes and carving, it's beautiful.
It is good, isn't it? It's really, really good. We've got the inversion at the moment, so when you go down into the valley, it's like -1 or something, and up here it's lovely. That's going to flip, and then tomorrow it goes a bit grey and snowy for the next 5 days. So, and before that we had a bit of kind of weather. We had a week of kind of weather, and then Friday it changed.
It's 70 centimetres.
Yeah, it's been absolutely magnificent. And up here, all open, right? Everything's open. You can go do the whole loop, go over to Diabloret, you can do everything. It's really, really cool. And obviously someone who doesn't live here full time, Finn, how are you finding it?
Oh, it's been great. Last 3 days, I think I came at the perfect time. Blue skies, fresh powder. It's pretty nice.
Hanging out with your mates. Skiing powder.
It's pretty nice.
It's nice to have mates who live in the Alps, right?
Yeah, pretty good mate to have.
Well, okay, so there you go, Iain. If you've got people coming out over the course of Christmas, New Year, conditions are ready for you, and a marked change from last year when it was a little bit difficult.
I was about to say, compared to last year, it is fivefold better.
It is, isn't it? It's absolutely.
We had no snow completely last year, so
glorious.
100 times better. 100 times better.
Excellent. All right, well, you guys, I know you're off. Have a great day. See ya.
Nice to meet you.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Right, thanks to Elena, Vanessa and Dave for those reports. Now, this seems like a good point to remind you, listener, that you can save money this winter when you book your ski hire at intersportrent.com and use the code SKIPODCAST. You get a guaranteed discount for all ski hire in France, Austria and Switzerland. And to make it even simpler, you don't even need to use that code. Just take the link in the show notes and your basket will automatically be reduced. So if you want to support the Ski Podcast, then please do remember to book your ski hire with Intersport and use the code SKIPODCAST at checkout, or take the link in the show notes. And if you do, you'll save money and you'll be helping the Ski Podcast. All right, let's move on to a bit of news. Last weekend was possibly the best ever single weekend in British snowsports history for Team GB. Let's start with Mia Brooks. She secured the Snowball Big Air Crystal Globe after a third in Copper Mountain. That was the start of a pretty amazing week for her, because she ended up finishing the week by being voted BBC Young Sports Personality of the Year. She's still only 16. She really has had an amazing career so far. So congratulations to you, Mia, and keep it going. So, on top of Mia Brooks securing the Crystal Globe, also last weekend, friend of the podcast, Jasmin Taylor, she took 2 first places in the Telemark Sprint event in Pinzolo. Andrew Musgrave, who you can listen to the special interview I did with him if you have a look through the back catalogue. He got a second in the cross country in Trondheim, and that is a career best result for him. He's had a couple of thirds before and equals Britain's best cross country result set by Andrew Young back in 2020. And couple more podiums. Kirsty Muir came third in the ski slope style at Copper Mountain, and Zoe Atkin took third in the half pipe. So pretty amazing weekend overall for Team GB, and we look forward to more of those throughout the season. Now, here's an unusual one. Did you know that they have ski slopes in the desert?
Ski slopes in the desert?
Where, in Saudi Arabia?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Hey, I don't think you ever will. Because Trojena is hard to imagine, but this is how we imagined it.
And so it goes on. This doesn't actually exist yet, but it is a plan in place in Saudi Arabia to build a ski resort in the desert, is in the mountains. I'm going to put a link into show notes if you want to look into it in any more detail. I've blogged about it on Skipedia. It's hard to know whether this is just more greenwashing or maybe call it sport washing. We've certainly seen art washing before with sponsorship by fossil fuel companies of galleries, etc. Maybe this is snow washing. I'm pretty sure there's so much money there, they'll make it happen. But it just intuitively seems like the wrong thing. But have a look at the blog post and you can make your own mind up. Now, let's segue to a sustainable alternative that is definitely not greenwashing. Last Saturday, I went out to the Alps on the new Eurostar Snow Train. There were several journalists on board. Helen, one of the reasons I wanted to invite you here today is that you were one of them. What were your initial thoughts or overall thoughts about the new service?
Well, I was just really excited that they brought it back because, as lots of people will be aware, it used to kind of be a regular service and then it wasn't, and COVID happened and affected it. And then you could only take the ski train to the Alps if you booked a package with Travel Ski Express, which I also tried and was really good. But I know a lot of people didn't love the lack of flexibility around that because it meant you had to buy with this specific company. So I just think it's really, really positive that they are bringing it back. It is, I think, a trial period as far as I'm aware. They haven't committed to the whole season, which is slightly annoying. But it was really good to see and see them testing it to kind of, I guess, gauge the appetite of people coming from Britain taking the train instead. And we were travelling with Ingham's because they've started offering it, which is a major first for a big company, a big tour operator to say, right, we think there's enough people that will want to travel this way. We're going to offer it as part of our package holiday. So, yeah, it's not quite the same as before. So you're not going straight through. You do have to change at Lille, but it was a very, very easy change. I'm sure you'd agree, and you don't have to change platform. You literally get off. I think it was about an hour's wait, so you can go and grab some food if you want to, come back down, get yourself comfy. The train was there really early, so you don't have to be stressed. So it wasn't like, some train changes are quite tricky because you've got all your stuff and you're like, oh God, I've got to get up some stairs, I've got to find my way across the station. But this one was very smooth.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with you there. I spoke to a number of people who were travelling on the train. Quite a few of them had skis or snowboard bags with them. And it was very straightforward to get off that Eurostar that came into Lille. And then you had to go maybe, well, I guess it depends where you were on the train, but let's say, 50, 100 metres up the platform to put it onto the new train that went from Lille onto Bourg St Maurice. And there were some dedicated storage areas on the second train. I didn't think at any point on either train there was any pressure because of the number of bags that were involved. In fact, on that first Eurostar, they'd set aside some seats for people to put their ski bags in, etc. We were guests of Ingham's on the way out there, and you mentioned Travel Ski, who also sell packages. But I think it's really important what you said there about just being able to buy a ticket, on the train, because that was one of the limiters with that previous service. And the people I spoke to, I mean, it did seem the majority of people had just bought that ticket and then were making their own arrangements, once they got to their destination.
Yeah, and I think that it's nice because for a long time, we had kind of summer package holidays, and then there was this real upsurge in people actually wanting to book those individually. Like, actually, I want to choose when my flight is and where it goes from. I want to choose my own hotel, actually. Maybe I want more than one hotel. Maybe I want to try different places and actually put together a bespoke trip that I'd like. And for such a long time, there just hasn't been really the same opportunity to do that with ski holidays. It's been like, no, you must get this exact package. It's going to be this long. We decide everything about it and you just buy it. And that's the only way you can really do it unless you're driving. So it's just really nice to have another option for people who would like to be a bit more flexible. For example, we went out there for kind of 3 days of skiing instead of a week. I couldn't have taken a week before Christmas. I mean, work's manic. So it's lovely to have that other side to it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to stress, I mean, you said it's almost like a test by Eurostar, because this service is only running until early February, and they actually sold 50% of their tickets in the first week. Realistically, if you're listening to this now and you want to go on that service, you can do it. I had a quick look, but it's going to be more expensive. It's a £365 return if you want to travel out, I think, on the 20th of January. What we're hoping is that Eurostar are going to have looked at this and decided, well, okay, there is genuine demand here, and when we come to next season, they will put it on for the whole season. And just to clarify, the way it worked was you board at St Pancras like you do with any train in the old Snow Train. It's actually a train going to Brussels, but you get off in Lille, where you can change in Lille, Europe on the same platform. And then you're getting on a second train, which is actually a Thalys train. Eurostar and Thalys have merged. So they're using one of their rolling stocks going out to Bourg St Maurice. And, we left at, I think, 9:01. And we got into Bourg St Maurice, actually a little late, scheduled to get in at 6:20, but there were all sorts of problems that affected every train going into that area, meant we were about an hour and a half late. For me, I went to Les Arcs, and as some listeners will know, the connection to Les Arcs is so good. I basically walked to the end of the platform, went over the bridge, and there's a funicular, which is, if you're traveling for the sustainable reasons, it's an electric funicular run on 100% renewable electricity, and that takes you up to 1600 for the final section of the journey. Helen, you went up to Teen. How long did it take from Bourg up to Teen?
It's not long. I think it's something like 40 minutes, maybe transfer, something like that. It didn't feel long at all because, it's not so far. It's not as easy as Les Arcs. I have to say, I've done that connection as well, Iain, and I'm always amazed. It's just so smooth. It's so easy. And it makes getting to Les Arcs one of the best kind of sustainable resort journeys. But yeah, I think anywhere in that bit of the French Alps, whether you want to go Three Valleys or Teen Val d'Isère or Le Plan, it's pretty straightforward and pretty easy.
Yeah. Well, I spoke to a couple of people on the train. Let's have a listen to some of those interviews. Right, I'm sitting here in Lille with Charlotte. Really interested to see you on the train with your 6-month-old. How's it gone so far?
Yeah, it's great. We take the Eurostar quite a lot, so it's not been very different from when we normally do that. But in the last few years, we've been flying to go skiing. But this year, we decided to take the train instead because we've got a baby, and it just makes the transfer so much easier because we just have a short taxi from Bourg rather than having to get a transfer from Geneva.
So the main reason was because it's just simpler with a young child, right?
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't want to take a shared taxi or a transfer bus from Geneva or Grenoble with a 6-month-old. So that's
what about the fact that the emissions are lower? Is that important to you at all?
That's certainly brilliant, but it's not something that I necessarily took into account when making my decision.
Cool. Well, enjoy the rest of your trip.
Thanks.
So I'm sitting here in Lille Station with Claire, and we've just been chatting about why you chose the Snow Train. I found it really interesting. Wonder if you'd like to, what was your thinking?
Just to shorten the length of journey from Nottinghamshire to the ski resort. So yeah, you get it all done in a day. You can relax.
I mean, I love that. You told me you started at 6 o'clock this morning in Nottingham.
I'm gonna be at Bourg St Maurice at 6:30, and where we're staying, it's just a 30-minute transfer.
Yeah.
So we'll be at the accommodation by 7 tonight.
Cool. And compared with driving, how do you think it comes out price-wise?
More expensive than what it would be driving.
Yeah.
I would say not double, but probably nearly double. But we felt that as it's near Christmas, we'd do it this year. But going forward, we probably will go back to the car. But we'll see how it goes with all the amount of luggage and the skis. It's been okay so far. So we'll just see what the last train's going to be like with this amount of luggage.
Excellent. Well, we'll find out when we get to Bourg St Maurice. Thanks very much, Claire. So we're currently on the train now from Lille to Bourg St Maurice with Faye and her family, and I'm really interested. You were telling me before, like, why you chose to travel on the train.
Yeah, well, we last went about 4 years ago skiing, and we'd always flown. But over recent years, we've just been thinking about other options to make it a bit more environmentally friendly.
Right.
Started looking on the internet and came across the ski train. I thought we'd give it a go.
Okay, and has it worked as you thought it would? Because, you know, this train obviously had to change in Lille. Was that okay?
Yeah, the change in Lille was absolutely fine. Just literally walk a few metres the other side of the platform. Had to ask somebody at the station just to make sure we were in the right place. But once we did that,
Okay, and what about the price relative to flying? You said you've flown before. How do you think it sort of comes out?
I think it's similar. Putting everything with everything that we paid for last time versus this time, I think it's similar. But,
well, you know, I'd like to think that if you can do it for a similar price and you can do it for a fraction of the emissions, and, you know, you've got children with you today, kind of, are they finding it okay? It's a long journey, but...
Yeah, so far so good. They've got a bag of stuff each, so they've got lots of things to do. Mostly IT devices at the moment, but hopefully the books will come out soon.
You're about to go on about the best family holiday that you can do anyway, all being outside on the mountain together. That's great. Thanks very much, Faye. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
It is a new service. How important do you think it is to have these sustainable options of travelling to the Alps?
Oh my goodness, I think it's so important. It's funny with skiing and with ski resorts. They are so aware of the impact of climate change. They are at the sharp end of it because they're seeing every year their snow get affected, and especially kind of resorts with glaciers, they can literally see them shrinking in real time. It's absolutely terrifying. And so they are trying to do more and more to promote sustainability because they know that their business model and their resorts won't be able to open if we carry on the way that we are. And to be honest, resorts can do as much as they like. But if everyone's flying there, that is by far the biggest carbon impact of a holiday, whether it's ski or not, but especially with ski. When we're all jumping on planes, I think, don't quote me on this, but it's something like 70% of the carbon of the holiday will be from the flight. So if you can get a train instead, if you can do something more sustainable, you are massively reducing the impact of that holiday. And it's a really, really great way to travel as well. I always stress this. It's not like you're kind of doing some sacrificial martyrdom bit by getting the train. It's enjoyable. You've got space to move around. You've got space to work. They've often got Wi-Fi and power sockets. It's just a really nice way to travel. So I really encourage people to consider it.
I will quote you on that because I think actually you're right in the zone there. You know, different organisations and research has shown that it's 50 to 80% of the carbon footprint if you're coming from the UK of your ski holiday is coming from your travel there. If you're flying, and regular listeners to the podcast will know that a champion of that low carbon side of things. And actually, I'm taking a little bit of inspiration from you, Helen. Because anyone who's listened to the special episode I recorded with you will know that despite being travel editor for The Independent, you actually haven't taken any flights in the last, I think it's 4 years now. Well, I guess I've taken inspiration by you, but many other people as well. And so for 2024, I'm going to make that commitment as well, that I'm not going to take any flights. And I think it's important what you just said. It's not really that much of a limiter. It's not particularly difficult. You know, I normally travel out to the Alps by train. I'm going to be doing a couple of other trips as well. In terms of, your life, 4 years you haven't been flying now. How have you found that experience so far?
I just found it really enjoyable, actually. It's so funny. And it's why, and you've had her on the podcast, she might even be on this podcast, Anna Hughes, founder of Flight Free UK, which encourages people to do exactly what you're talking about and pledge to not fly for a year. It's a really smart campaign because what you find when you do it for a year is that it's completely possible. And so that's why I've kept taking it, because every year I'm like, oh, I could probably do that again. It wasn't too difficult. And if you do it year by year, it doesn't feel too scary. If you told me 4 years ago I'd have done 4 years without flying, I would have laughed in your face. I'd have said you're absolutely mad. And yet here we are. And I'm going to be taking the pledge again for 2024 and making it 5 years. And somehow it just hasn't felt like a hardship. I've experienced loads of different kinds of travel. I've got sleeper trains. I've got lovely ferries. I've got long distance coach journeys, which are less lovely, but completely doable and will get you where you need to go. So I'm just excited to carry on this journey, to be honest, and see how far I can get.
Well, I mean, from my point of view, we were actually chatting on the train yesterday. I was picking up, some tips from you. One of the trips I'm going to do is going to involve taking the ferry as a foot passenger. I'm going to be going on the Caledonian sleeper up to Scotland. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And yes, you did mention Anna Hughes, who's the founder of Flight Free UK, and definitely an inspiration. She has been on the show before, and she sent me a short message.
Hi Iain, it's Anna from Flight Free UK. I'm really pleased to hear you've taken our Flight Free challenge for 2024. It's great to have you as part of our campaign. I'm sure that you'll have a year full of adventures, and I know that you travel by train a lot, so this is part of the point of our challenge, to show that not flying doesn't mean not travelling. And I wish you all the best for your travels this year. If anyone else would like to sign up to the challenge or find out what it's all about, you can go to flightfree.co.uk. There's lots of information on our website about why we should be flying less and how to do that. So the places you can still go, all the reasons why grounded travel is as good for you, the traveller, as it is for the planet. So thanks, Iain, for joining us, and have a happy Flight Free year.
Great. Well, so just to finish that off, I should remind listeners it's not too late to pick up a Christmas present for the low carbon travel fan in your life. I happen to know of a really good book called Zero Altitude, How I Learned to Fly Less and Travel More. That's one of yours, I think, Helen, isn't it?
It is. Thank you for that plug. I wasn't expecting it. But yes, it's a very, very good Christmas present, or present for any occasion, for someone in your life who's looking to do lots more traveling, but maybe thinking about the environmental impact. So please pick it up anywhere online.
Yeah, well, if you want to hear more about that and about Helen's history of not flying, I'll put a link in the show notes, but we did a special all about that. Now, let's move on to Les Arcs. I said I went up to Les Arcs, and one of the great things about the resort there is they are really focused on sustainability. I would say them and Vallier are probably the two leading resorts in terms of their attitude towards sustainability across all ski resorts in the Alps. And more recently, I've covered some of the sustainable aspects of their approach before, but more recently, they have become only the second ski resort in the world and the first ski resort in Europe to be given B Corp accreditation. So listeners, you might not be familiar with B Corp. I mean, it is an international accreditation with over 7,000 companies across the world who've got it. Helen, I wondered if you're familiar with it. Do you want to try and explain to our listeners what it is?
I'll try. I am familiar with it. So as you say, yeah, it's this accreditation that is for companies to apply for, that basically proves they're taking sustainability really, really seriously, but not just sustainability. I think it's kind of, people and planet. So if you treat your employees really badly, but you're green, that's not going to cut it for B Corp. And a big part of it is measuring your impact. And that's kind of the first step on any company's journey to reducing is, okay, let's find out first of all, let's measure our carbon impact. And then we look at all the ways in which we can try and cut that back and cut it back and cut it back. So it's very stringent. It's quite hard to get. And companies that want it really have to put in a lot of work in order to achieve it. So it's not some kind of tick box greenwashing thing, which is good. And that's why we like it. So it's kind of amazing that Les Arcs have managed to get that. It's a really, really positive step. And hopefully it will encourage other resorts to do the same.
No, you're exactly right. And I think it probably will, because Les Arcs was one of the first resorts to get the Flocon Vert accreditation, which is something for French ski resorts, which is specifically about their environmental standards. And at the time, there were only 8 resorts in France that had the Flocon Vert. Now there's 20 resorts in France, and they've actually introduced different levels within that. So it does attract other people, and it gives something to help the consumer to understand which resorts or which destinations or which companies are actually making these changes and are making the effort. And you mentioned there, Helen, about B Corp, about how, I mean, some listeners will probably be familiar with the phrase CSR. It sounds very dry, but it's really about more than just that environmental side of things. It's about your responsibility towards your community as well. So part of the process that they had to go through for this is they're demonstrating that 90% of their purchasing comes from that local region. And in fact, I had a meeting with Clemence Vallier. She was head of the committee that put their whole of their B Corp application through. They're now looking to draw that in even closer. So a third of their purchasing would just be from within the Savoie. And they have a lot of other projects as well, where they're basically readjusting the mountain back to the status it was before the lifts and the piece were put in. Because at the time, back in the 60s, in the case of Les Arcs, they essentially just ripped up the mountain and put these pieces in. And now they're going through a process of effectively rewilding, creating wetland areas by replanting things like rhododendrons and myrtle, which is responsible for those wonderful myrtle tarts that you get in the Alps. Tree planting is a specific type of fir that they're working with the French Office of Forestry to replant on the slopes of Les Arcs, to try and come up with a different type of species that's going to be resistant to some of the parasites that they get there. All of these different elements, there's a lot of education involved in it as well. Educating the staff who work for the domain, but also educating visitors as well. And if anyone's been out to Vallier, at the top of the Vallier gondola, there's a really, really interesting museum, which is probably aimed at children, but is really interesting for everyone, which just gives you much more of an insight into the flora and fauna, 30 different species that live in the mountainside in that area, and trying to get people to develop that understanding that, essentially we're sharing that space with them. And so much of, the B Corp is about that side of things. There's also the fact that, I can't remember if I mentioned it, there's 500 members of staff employed by ADS, who are the ski company who operate Les Arcs. But their research has shown that there's 2,500 other jobs, 5 times as many, that are dependent on the visitors coming to that resort. So their education spreads out to all of them as well, and helping people to understand that community and the environment around them is really important. So I mentioned I talked to Clemence. Let's have a listen to a bit of that interview.
I'm currently sitting in La Cachette Hotel in Les Arcs, and I'm here today with Clemence Vallier. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Ça va bien?
Bien et vous?
I'm very well, thank you. And the reason we're here, and I'm talking to you, Clemence, is because Les Arcs has recently got B Corp accreditation. And you said to me earlier that took a long time. How long has that journey been?
The journey during 2 years, when we decided to launch the certification.
The thing about B Corp is that it's a much bigger achievement than just something like Flocon Vert. Like, I was here a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I think, and Les Arcs had just got Flocon Vert. But B Corp is about more than just the environmental side of things. What are the other things that you're taking into account? What are the other elements?
We value what we can make for the workers, what we can make for our territory, what we can make for the clients, our customers, and what are practical on ethical and transparency.
And, there are some real specific projects within that. I think one of the most interesting ones that you told me about is that you have been doing a lot of planting on the mountain. Yeah. So you've replanted trees and plants as well. What are those? What have you done there?
We planting sapin pectiné, blueberries, rhododendron.
Yeah.
To refresh, to make the mountain like it was on the past.
Right, because before the peace were there then, so when the peace were put in, a lot of these plants were taken out, and now you're putting them back.
Yeah, we put it back.
Company des Alps owns Les Arcs, and I know that they have a net zero target. Were they encouraging for you to try and get B Corp accreditation?
Yeah, there will be a real support for us because certain projects like the HVO, it's apporté by our group, the city.
So, and what you're referring to there is converting the snow groomers from diesel to HVO, hydrogenated vegetable oil. Not very easy to say. And so one of the things you said there, you're talking about, some people may not understand the differences, but essentially scope 1 and scope 2 are things that are under your control, and scope 3 are out of your control. Yeah. But you can affect those as well, because I travelled here by train, and one of the great things about coming to Les Arcs by train is you can come on the funicular, and you've made the decision to make it free for people who come by train.
We came here in train. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a way of reducing the overall emissions.
We don't know really, but we make that to encourage customers to reduce our emission when they come to enjoy our ski area.
Yeah, that's great. Les Arcs is the first ski resort in Europe to get B Corp accreditation. Do you think now that that's happened, there'll be other resorts that want to do that as well? Would that be a good thing?
Maybe, and if they want to go and to come with us in the B Corp movement, we enjoy to help.
Yeah, in English we call that a win-win situation. Does that have that in French as well?
Gagnant-gagnant.
Gagnant-gagnant. Yeah, well, let's hope that is what happens. That's great. Thank you so much for that.
So that was really interesting, and I'm going to write an article about that for In the Snow magazine. So it's not published yet, but when it is, I'll include a link into the show notes. Now, on the train, on the snow train, going out to the Alps last week, Chemmy Alcott was there, also as a guest of Ingham's, and I took the opportunity to talk to her about her experiences of driving an electric vehicle in the Alps. She mentioned this to me when I was talking to her at the ski show in the winter. I've been trying to find the time to track her down. She did over 5,000 miles in her car. So let's have a listen to that. Something I wanted to talk to you about. You told me about it at the ski show, about how last winter you spent all of your time in the Alps last winter driving around in an electric vehicle. Now, I've had a bit of experience of driving an electric vehicle in the Alps, but not the whole winter. So I don't know if it's possible to kind of summarise, how it went overall, but let's be specific. I mean, how many miles did you cover?
So I did 4,900 miles, 12 countries.
12 countries,
yeah.
Right.
And it was incredible. It was a real steep learning curve. I want to say it was very easy, but it wasn't. It was something that I couldn't research enough on how to do efficiently. It caused me quite a lot of anxiety because I struggled in certain countries like Germany with charging points when I was doing an overnighter.
Okay.
And I'd booked a hotel that had a charging point, and I get there and there's a car in it that had been dumped 2 days before.
I hate that. Yeah, people blocking. So just tell us what vehicle were you using?
So I used a Skoda Enyaq,
yeah.
4-wheel drive. With a roof box, that's really important.
Yeah, because that affects the efficiency.
Actually, I was really surprised overall by it not affecting it more.
Yeah.
I did a lot of the tricks, like no heating, to the extent that I had a special, I still have it for this winter as well. I've got a special driving jacket, special shoes, special gloves that I wear. No one on tour comes in the car with me.
Because you don't put the heating on at all.
I don't put the heating on, so every half an hour I have to wind the windows down to let the moisture out. Because I'm also really competitive, Iain, so I like to win. Each journey has to be a win for me, so I want to see my stats improve. And obviously,
so you talk about the number of miles you get, but I think it can be miles per kilowatt hour or something like that.
Exactly.
So I understand, right? Okay, you're keeping the heating off to try and get the maximum range possible. What was the range, or is the range in that vehicle?
I think the range is normally around 300, and I would get about 220, 240 on the mountain roads, and then on the motorway, as long as you're kind of not going too fast, you can minimise that as well.
So I guess the key thing is, you mentioned there, you kind of had anxiety. Being able to charge is the key issue.
I'm not an anxious person. I do like to prepare anyway, professionally. But yeah, it was the charging, the control of the charging, not knowing if a certain charging point, because in the mountains, we're not talking about, I'm not on the motorways all the time. On the motorways, they are amazing. There's parts in France that have a huge abundance of charging for cars, and Austria, in the McDonald's even, there's great charging points. But it's on the mountain roads, when you're trying to find a charging point there, that you really are reliant on a few. And
it's interesting. Resorts are definitely putting them in, with increasing frequency, but you often find, that maybe they're in an underground car park or something like that, and you spend all your time going in there to then discover there's another car that's already parked, and that's it. You can't do anything else.
So I would try and make a stop in a town, which I didn't need to go to, that then I could do my laundry at the same time. Because the other issue I had was, for the first month, every time I charged, I had a coffee and cake, and then I realised I couldn't do up my ski trousers anymore. Right. And I was like, this isn't the most efficient use of my time. So then I started rolling a yoga mat out, doing yoga, or going to do laundry.
I'm thinking that's unusual. I mean, most people listening to this podcast would be thinking about whether or not they can actually drive to the mountains. And I think the point you're making there is, on motorways, the provision of charges is much better. And this would be my advice for sure, you should top up at the last big supercharger before you go up to resort, because that way you're going to cover it. And then you'll find that when you actually leave and when you go downhill, you get that benefit of the regenerative braking, and your range will go up.
I mean, I reckon anyone who saw me driving at World Champs last year in Courchevel, coming down from the Courchevel side up to Beauzelle, where we were above that, thought I was the world's worst driver, because I was wavering around 17% charge for 2 weeks, which was quite stressful. So I was really trying to maximise on the downhill braking to charge up the car. And the Skoda, I have to say, is very good at that.
Okay.
But you do have to kind of go quite heavy on it to make an impact. So.
And what about conditions? I mean, if you did 5,000 miles in the winter, you must have driven in some pretty bad conditions at times. How was it? How was the car in that? I
mean, I've obviously driven a lot of cars in the snow during my snowy life, and I have to say, I think it's one of the best. The pickup on going up hills on icy slopes was amazing. It comes with snow socks, it comes with all these chains. Obviously, it's a four-wheel drive. I didn't have to use anything. It was unbelievably sensitive to the conditions in terms of how it can keep the traction.
Yep.
And I was really surprised by that.
I haven't driven an electric vehicle in the snow, but I've read and written about it a little bit. And I think another thing is, like, when you're let's say going downhill or having to brake, because it has that regen braking, then that's a much easier way to slow the car down.
And
it's less likely to skid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, safer. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
It feels quite heavy when you're not used to it. I always say that to people, and you have to tell everyone in the back that you're doing this to charge the car, because it can be quite an aggressive movement on the core when someone's using that regen braking.
And so a very different experience for you. You went around all these different countries, from the massive races to each other. If you're going to make a recommendation to someone who's thinking about taking their electric car to the Alps and maybe doing a bit more of an extended trip, what would you say to them?
I would say, do your research, prepare, get the ChargeMap card, get all the apps that you think you'll need beforehand, plan your journey. We've done it again this year. I just want to say that I know it sounds like I'm saying it's a nightmare. It wasn't a nightmare. It was a learning curve. There's very much a difference, and I started with nothing, and I built up that understanding and educating myself, and we've done it this year, and it took us from door to door, from London to Flen, 14 hours. With all the charging, with the tunnel. So that's pretty impressive now. I think everything is changing the whole time. The infrastructure is catching up. And it is really enjoyable. Why I love it is the silence. As you can tell, I'm quite a hustle and bustle kind of person. I'm very busy. There's loudness to everything, whether that's me as a family life or anything else. I love getting in the car, in the mountains, and driving electric and having absolute silence.
Apart from when you've got the windows open to clear out the condensation, but then that's nature. Cool. That's really interesting, Chemmy, and enjoy. You've got the same car for this winter, right? Yeah. So enjoy driving it around. Look forward to hearing how it goes.
Thanks, Iain.
Thanks. So that was really interesting. Apologies for the quality of that recording. Quite a lot of coughing and background noise there. We were on the train, but I really wanted to take that opportunity to talk to Chemmy because she's really got a lot of experience there of driving an electric vehicle in the mountains. And, evidently that range anxiety did affect her. But as she said, by going up and down the mountain the whole time, particularly in that Courchevel section, she just managed to keep the range there. So I have driven electric vehicles out to the Alps a couple of times. I'm not going to be driving one this year, but I am going out in a slightly different vehicle, which is going to be an experiment. I'll be reporting on this later on in the ski podcast, but I just wanted to bring it into the spotlight just now. What I'm doing in April is I'm going out. There's two families. We're going to be travelling in a van out the Alps, slightly different van from usual. It's actually being rented from a company called Vans for Bands. And these vans are literally, as the name suggests, they are for bands. So they've got a massive amount of storage room in the back. And then in the middle, you've got three sets of very nicely appointed seats facing each other with a table in between. So the idea is that the kids are going to be able to sit back there, play cards, there's a couple of video screens as well, so you can watch movies, etc. as well. And then in the front, we're going to have two families, so 4 adults will be able to share the driving on the journey. So we'll have less driving each. The cost will be less overall than two families driving a car each. And I've done the calculations, and the carbon emissions will be significantly less as well. Based on how I've calculated it, we won't really know until I drive it and see how much diesel it uses. But it'll be around 11% of the cost of the carbon cost of flying. So if you're interested in that, look out for, I'll put a link in the show notes, Vans for Bands, and you can see exactly what that type of vehicle is. And if there's a group of you wanting to go out, it's certainly going to be a luxurious way of doing it. I enjoy all feedback about the show. I'd like to know what you think, especially about our features. So please contact me on social at Ski Podcast or by email to skipodcast@gmail.com. Neil Howlett contacted me. He said, thanks for the pod. Really enjoying the content. We have a shared passion for trains. But he also said he was very interested to hear about heli skiing in Chile in episode 194. While Patagonia sounds incredible, I was disappointed to hear about all the heli rides. How can this be scalable in this day and age? You've got a valid point there, Neil, and actually you're not the only person to raise the carbon cost of this type of trip. And, should I even be mentioning it or promoting it on the podcast? And I guess, my answer to that is that, I try and give people the information, to help people understand the impact and to let people understand how they can go about minimizing their carbon footprint. But I don't think that I'm in a position to say to people, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that. And you must come across this, Helen. I mean, you're on the travel side of things at The Independent. How do you square the more higher carbon trips? And what's your view in terms of, whether you should promote them or not?
It's a really good question. I feel very similar to you, Iain, I think, in that, before I stopped flying, I took an awful lot of flights in my lifetime, an awful lot. And so I'm coming at this from a position of zero judgment because I've been to all these places. So I can't sit here and lecture people that they're not allowed to. Equally, what I try and do is promote the lower carbon options, talk about how positive and how enjoyable they are and focus on that side rather than the negative. Because I also think, I'm not an expert in this, but things I've read around behaviour change, you do not change people's behaviour by being judgmental and making them feel bad. That is not what makes us change our mind about something. You do it by inspiring them and encouraging them. And people in your life might see you doing something or hear about you doing something and think, oh, maybe I'll give that a go. It's the whole catching flies with honey thing. So yeah, I like to kind of promote the better options, but I'm never going to sit here and tell people what to do, purely because I know it won't work. It just makes people more stubborn, doesn't it?
Well, okay. I mean, I think that's fair. And that's kind of effectively my answer as well. And the only other thing I could say to you, Neil, is that 40+% of our listeners are all over the world. The last time I had, look, I see we have 3 listeners in Argentina. So maybe they're the ones who'll be taking this trip. We've had a lot more feedback as well. So a few others. AP Northfields, loving the frequent podcast drops as we enter the new season. Keep up the great work. Wigman on Snowhead said, love the 192. You don't get quality chat regarding coach chassis lengths and the best Italian refuges anywhere else. Peter S., also on Snowhead, said, great interview with Lou about the Dolomites. That was number 192. She knows her stuff. Mike Greenland very kindly bought me a coffee and said, always a good show. Peter Till said, thank you for the podcast. It's gotten me more and more excited for my first trip. And Martin Wallerman said, only recently discovered the Ski Podcast and really love it. I've been working my way through the older 180 plus episodes in the last few weeks. It's a pleasure on my daily commutes. So if you like the podcast, there are 3 things you can do to help. Firstly, you can review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That helps listeners find us. You can subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And finally, you can book your ski hire with Intersport Rent using the code SKIPODCAST or taking the link in the show notes. Now, there are now 197 episodes to catch up with. I had a look, 146 were listened to in the last week, which is amazing. I also had a quick look. 58% of our listeners are in the UK, 42% around the world, and I saw that 9 of them were in Saudi Arabia. So if you are in Saudi Arabia and you're a skier, let me know what you think about the Trojana Resort, the ski resort in the desert. Now, there's so much to listen to in our back catalogue. Just go to theskipodcast.com, search around the tags and categories. You're bound to find something of interest to you. You can follow me at Skipedia and the podcast at Ski Podcast. But for now, I'd like to thank Intersport for sponsoring the show and thank my guest today, Helen. Thank you, Helen, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Finally, listener, thank you for joining us. And until next time, goodbye. Well, that isn't quite the last podcast of 2023 because we've got another one of our equipment specials coming up soon, but that was definitely the most complicated to edit. There were 19 different bits of audio, but I think I've managed to string them together okay. So, listener, if you enjoyed the podcast and you enjoy the effort that goes into creating it, you are very welcome to buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/the Ski Podcast. Coffees are always appreciated. Thanks again for your support and for listening to the show.